Raquel Welch has died at the age of 82 following a brief illness. Whether on screen or stage, including Broadway, she knew how to put on a show with glamour, heart, and humor.
Why was Raquel Welch famous for her bad behavior in Hollywood? Was she really difficult or just too bold for the boys' club? From her fur bikini fame to courtroom battles with movie studios, Raquel didn't just break rules, she rewrote them. And while Hollywood tried to label her a diva, she became something even more dangerous, unstoppable. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you might just see the bad girl in a whole new light. The birth of a new bombshell. Raquel Welch didn't just arrive in Hollywood, she exploded into it. When Marilyn Monroe died in 1962, the world mourned more than a woman. It mourned the end of an era. But not for long. Just a few years later, Raquel appeared in a fur bikini in 1 million years BC, and everything changed. That image, silent, wild, and unforgettable, didn't just go viral before the internet. It became a pop culture relic. Suddenly, Raquel Welch wasn't just an actress. She was the fantasy. But here's the twist. Raquel wasn't trying to be another Marilyn. She didn't giggle. She didn't play dumb. She redefined what it meant to be a sex symbol, darker, sharper, more in control. With curves like a sculpture and eyes that could freeze a man in his tracks, she made the world stop and stare. And yet, Raquel always said, "I wasn't really comfortable with being seen as just that. I wanted more." She was bold, exotic, and unapologetic, and that's where the trouble started. Next came Hollywood, and the uncomfortable realization that not everyone was ready for a woman who didn't play by the rules. Too hot for the studio system. Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with Raquel Welch. Sure, the studio heads wanted her on their posters, she sold tickets, and they knew it. But they didn't want her asking questions. They didn't want her demanding better roles. They wanted her to look pretty, smile, and show up. But Raquel had other plans. She pushed back. She refused to be the giggling eye candy. She questioned scripts. She fought for better characters. "I wasn't going to be their puppet," she later said. And that attitude, it scared them. Her male co-stars often felt intimidated. Directors called her difficult. Executives whispered she was hard to manage. But maybe she wasn't too much. Maybe they were just too used to women being silent. Even as the cameras loved her, the suits behind them didn't. But Raquel wasn't looking for their approval. She was building her own image, her own power. That power, however, came with a cost. And to build her empire, Raquel had to hide something that was deeply hers, her name. The Latina she was told to hide. Before she was Raquel Welch, she was Jo Raquel Tejada, a young woman with Bolivian roots and a fire in her soul that no camera could capture. Her father, Armando Tejada, was a Bolivian aerospace engineer. Her mother, Josephine, was of English descent. Raquel grew up in a culturally blended household in California, speaking English, living American life, but always feeling a strong pull to her Latin heritage. But Hollywood wasn't interested in roots. They were interested in selling fantasies. In the early 1960s, ethnic names were considered a liability. Executives, agents, and casting directors didn't hide it. "It's too ethnic," they said. "Audiences won't connect." One studio exec even suggested changing her first name to something like Debbie, because that, apparently, was what Americans wanted from their screen sirens. Raquel made a decision. She kept her first name, but dropped Tejada. She took her ex-husband's last name, Welch, and reintroduced herself to Hollywood with a name that erased part of who she was. It wasn't just branding, it was survival. "I never denied who I was," she later told interviewers. "But I understood the game. They weren't going to give a Latin girl the lead role. Not back then. That decision haunted her for years. While her face became iconic, her cultural identity was often buried beneath the surface. In interviews, people treated her like an exotic mystery instead of an American woman of color. The media marveled at her unplaceable beauty, rarely acknowledging the very heritage that shaped it. Still, Raquel didn't forget, and she never let others forget either. She often spoke about her Latina roots later in life, reclaiming what had once been hidden. She was proud of where she came from. She knew what it cost her to get where she was. It's easy to say now that she should have fought harder, kept her name, made a stand. But at the time, it would have meant the end of her career before it began. Raquel didn't just want fame. She wanted to be seen. And to do that, she had to blend in before she could stand out. I had to become their version of me before I could show them the real one, she said. And once she got in the door, she didn't just take a seat, she owned the room. That strategic sacrifice, changing her name, hiding her heritage, was both a heartbreak and a masterstroke. It allowed her to infiltrate an industry that had no room for women like her. And once she was in, she rewrote the rules. With her new name, Raquel Welch rose fast and made the world take notice. Up next, we'll see how she used that unforgettable face and presence to rise to stardom, while never losing the edge that came from being an outsider. The rise of a legend with side of rebellion. In the beginning, Raquel Welch took what she could get, and she got very little. The roles were shallow, the costumes tighter than the dialogue, and the scripts rarely gave her more than a few lines. She appeared in early films like A Swingin' Summer and Roustabout, with Elvis Presley, playing pretty girls with pretty faces. No substance, no complexity, just someone to be looked at. But even in those throwaway roles, something was different. She had presence, a raw magnetism that made her hard to ignore, no matter how little she was given to do. Audiences didn't just watch her, they were transfixed. Her big break came with Fantastic Voyage in 1966, a sci-fi adventure that finally put her in a major studio film with a real budget. It was her stepping stone. But it was her next role that would change everything, even if it barely involved any dialogue at all. 1 million years BC wasn't about plot. It wasn't about performances. It was about Raquel Welch in a fur bikini. And it worked. That image, windswept hair, primal strength, animal skin curves, became one of the most iconic photographs of the 20th century. Overnight, she was no longer just a working actress. She was the fantasy. Posters of her adorned college dorms, garage walls, and studio offices. Photographers lined up to capture her. Publicists built her into a symbol. And suddenly, Raquel Welch was everywhere. But inside that fur bikini was a woman already starting to feel the weight of the world's expectations. It was like being in a box with no door, she once said. They wanted the image, not the person. I was expected to just smile and not ask questions. Still, Raquel didn't play by those rules for long. Even as Hollywood tried to box her in, she pushed back. She started asking for stronger roles, deeper scripts. She wanted to act, not just pose. She turned down parts that were purely decorative. She clashed with directors who expected her to just look pretty and stay quiet. This resistance didn't go unnoticed. Some called her difficult, others labeled her a diva. But the truth was simple. She was a woman demanding respect in a business that only valued her curves. That quiet rebellion, the one that simmered beneath her red carpet smiles, became part of her legend. She didn't storm out of rooms. She stayed in them and made people uncomfortable. She wasn't just rising. She was reshaping what stardom looked like for a woman who refused to be controlled. And as her image exploded into pop culture history, her body became the center of attention and controversy in ways that would both launch her and haunt her. Next, we dive into how Hollywood's obsession with her physical form nearly eclipsed everything else she had to offer, and how Raquel fought to reclaim the narrative. Hollywood's obsession with her body. To most men in Hollywood, Raquel Welch wasn't just an actress. She was an event, a spectacle, something to be admired from afar, but not listened to up close. Directors, producers, and studio heads didn't cast her because they believed in her acting. They cast her because the camera couldn't get enough of her. When she walked on set, everything stopped, not because of her talent, though she had it, but because of how she looked in a costume. And to make no mistake, every costume was designed to reveal, not to empower. From skin-tight cat suits to plunging necklines, she became a walking, breathing fantasy, constructed for the male gaze. The costume fitting was always the real audition, she once joked, but there was truth in the bitterness behind her smile. The producers wanted to sell sex, and Raquel became the billboard. They didn't ask what she thought about the script. They didn't ask if she was comfortable. They asked her to show more skin, give a little wink, and keep quiet. She was plastered on posters, calendars, and magazine covers. The headlines weren't about her talent. They were about her waistline, her bikini, her legs. And the press? They weren't much better. Interviews often skipped her views on her craft and instead focused on questions like, "What's your beauty routine?" Or, "How does it feel to be every man's dream?" Rarely did. They asked what she dreamed about. At first, Raquel played along. She understood the game. She smiled for the cameras. She struck the poses. She let the world look, but not too close. Inside, though, she was growing restless. She wanted better. She deserved better. They only wanted the body, she said years later, but I had a mind, too. Behind the scenes, she was fighting for stronger roles. She read scripts carefully, turning down parts that reduced her to just a prop. She clashed with directors who treated her like set dressing. She challenged writers who gave her 10 words when they gave her male co-stars entire monologues. Raquel wasn't just sexy, she was sharp. But that sharpness made her dangerous to a system built on silent beauty. She walked onto set like a goddess, radiating confidence and poise. Men drooled, women watched in awe. But Raquel walked out of those same studios knowing exactly what the trade-off was. She was being paid for her body, not her brain. And she was done pretending that was enough. Her pushback didn't go unnoticed. Whispers started. Stories spread. The label came quick, difficult. Then came the headlines calling her the diva. But underneath it all, this wasn't about behavior. It was about defiance. And soon, Raquel Welch's refusal to stay quiet would launch her into one of Hollywood's most infamous disasters, a film so bold, so controversial, it nearly took her down with it. Up next, we step into Myra Breckinridge, the movie that turned her reputation upside down. Bad girl, or just a woman who spoke her mind? By the mid-1970s, Raquel Welch wasn't just famous, she was feared in certain Hollywood circles. She had become the woman producers warned each other about, not because she was late, not because she couldn't act, but because she didn't take orders like she was supposed to. Some directors called her uncooperative. Some co-stars said she was cold. But when Raquel sat down with Barbara Walters and was asked directly about her so-called difficult reputation, she didn't flinch. "I'm a perfectionist," she said, "but I'm worth it." That line, sharp, confident, and true, stuck. To Raquel, being labeled difficult was just the price of demanding respect. She wasn't yelling on set. She wasn't causing chaos. She simply had opinions, and she refused to shrink herself to fit into anyone else's vision. That was radical at the time. For a woman who looked like that to also talk back, it made the old guard nervous. And that tension set the stage for one of the most notorious risks of her career, a movie that would haunt her and define her rebellious streak forever. The Myra Breckinridge disaster. In 1970, Raquel Welch made a choice that shocked Hollywood. At the height of her fame, when most sex symbols played it safe, she took on a role that no other major star would touch. She agreed to play the lead in Myra Breckinridge, a surreal, sexually charged satire based on Gore Vidal's controversial novel about gender, power, and identity. Her character, a transgender woman who dominates the men around her and challenges every conservative idea of sexuality the movie-going public held dear. It wasn't just a bold move. It was radical, but Hollywood wasn't ready for that kind of revolution, especially not led by a woman they only ever wanted in a bikini. The production quickly spiraled into chaos. The director clashed with the cast. The script was rewritten on the fly. Tensions flared behind the scenes. Mae West, one of the film's other stars, famously refused to even be in the same room as Raquel. "I never saw her on set," Raquel later said. "She filmed all her scenes separately. It was bizarre." And then came the release. What should have been a cultural earthquake turned into a cinematic disaster. Critics didn't just pan the film, they shredded it. The New York Times called it an insult to intelligence, and audiences stayed away in droves. The media had a field day, and much of the blame was laid squarely on Raquel. It didn't matter that she didn't direct the film. It didn't matter that she delivered her role exactly as written. To the press, it was easier to say she sank the ship than to admit the ship was never seaworthy. "They said I ruined it," she recalled, "but all I did was take a chance." And that was Raquel in a nutshell. She wasn't just a bombshell. She was a risk-taker, a rule-breaker. She didn't want to be remembered for standing still. She wanted to be remembered for doing something bold, even if it meant falling flat. Still, the sting of Myra Breckinridge lasted. Her image took a hit. Hollywood executives, already wary of her reputation for being difficult, now had ammo to shut her out of major roles. But Raquel didn't fade. She didn't flinch. She went back to work. She kept showing up, and soon she would turn the tables in a way no one saw coming. Because if Myra Breckinridge was the scandal that nearly broke her, her next move would make her something far more dangerous than a sex symbol or a flop. She'd become a threat to the power structure itself. Up next, the shocking lawsuit that rocked the studios and proved Raquel Welch wasn't just beautiful, she was fearless. The MGM lawsuit that shocked Hollywood. In 1981, Raquel Welch did something no one expected. She took MGM to court and won. The studio had fired her from the film Cannery Row after just a few weeks of shooting. Their reason? Raquel had insisted on doing her own hair and makeup at home instead of on set. They replaced her with a younger actress, hoping the bad press would quietly fade. It didn't. Raquel sued for breach of contract. MGM called her difficult. They claimed she was unprofessional. But in court, she fought back hard, and the jury believed her. She won $10 million. That wasn't just a personal victory. It was a message to every studio. Raquel Welch wasn't afraid of anyone. "They thought I'd go away," she said, "but I knew my rights." That lawsuit gave her a new kind of power. But it also reinforced the image she could never fully escape: the diva, the troublemaker, the woman who wouldn't stay in her place. And soon, that image became more legend than truth. Truth or myth? Stories followed Raquel wherever she went. One director claimed she refused to speak to the crew. A producer said she had a no eye contact rule. A co-star once joked that sharing a trailer with her would be worse than a hurricane. But the people who actually worked with Raquel, many of them said something different. She showed up on time. She knew her lines. She hit her marks. She was always prepared, one assistant director recalled. She just didn't like being treated like a prop. So were the diva rumors real? Or was Raquel simply ahead of her time, demanding the same level of respect her male co-stars took for granted? The truth probably lives somewhere in between. But in an industry that punished women for having standards, Raquel's refusal to play small became its own kind of rebellion. And off-camera, her mystery only grew, especially when it came to her personal life. Private passion, public image. For someone so often seen on screen, Raquel Welch was incredibly private. She married young, divorced early, and after that, kept her romances in the shadows. The tabloids tried to link her to every leading man she ever shared a scene with: Steve McQueen, Richard Burton, even Elvis Presley. But Raquel never confirmed much. "Some things belong to me alone," she once told a reporter. She refused to let her love life become a spectacle. She understood the value of mystery, and in doing so, she kept control of her narrative in a way few stars ever could. That privacy only added to her power. Because while other starlets chased headlines, Raquel stayed silent and let the world wonder. Next came the darker side of that image, what it meant to be everyone's fantasy, but no one's reality. The cost of being every man's fantasy. Raquel Welch was, for decades, the face of male desire. Posters of her in that iconic fur bikini-lined dorm rooms, barracks, and barbershops around the world. She was the fantasy, untouchable, idealized, and larger than life. But the truth behind that image was much more complicated. In interviews later in life, Raquel admitted the toll it took. Being a sex symbol felt like a prison, she confessed. People didn't want to know who I was, they just wanted the poster. Her beauty, while a blessing in terms of fame, often came at the expense of her talent. Critics rarely talked about her acting skills, her dedication, or her work ethic. Instead, they focused on how she looked in a dress, or out of one. It wasn't just the media. Even in her own industry, producers, directors, and studio heads treated her like a product. A body that moved, a face that sold tickets, rarely a full human being. And Raquel felt that. She carried it. For all the glamour, there was loneliness. For all the attention, there was alienation. People wanted the illusion, not the woman. "I couldn't be myself around most people," she once said. "They already decided who I was before I opened my mouth." That isolation drove her to seek more control over her life and her legacy. Which brings us to her next transformation: reinvention as a power player. By the 1980s, many of Raquel Welch's bombshell contemporaries had faded into obscurity. But not Raquel. She pivoted and proved she was more than a pretty face. She launched her own line of fitness videos, which became bestsellers. She authored books on beauty and wellness. She created a wig line that grew into a multi-million-dollar business. Suddenly, she wasn't just the fantasy, she was the brand. The very thing that had once boxed her in, her looks, was now a tool she used to build an empire. "I knew what people expected of me," she said, "so I took it and made it mine." This phase of her career didn't involve bikinis or scripts. It involved boardrooms, business strategy, and branding. And she thrived in it. She had become something even more powerful than a movie star. A self-made mogul. Her business moves not only gave her independence, they earned her respect. Quietly, without much fanfare, she rewrote the rules for actresses who came after her. But even as she rose higher, controversy never stopped chasing her, especially when it came to the roles she took and the boundaries she broke. a cultural lightning rod. One of Raquel Welch's most talked-about roles was in 100 Rifles, a 1969 Western in which she played opposite NFL star Jim Brown. The movie made headlines for its action sequences, but history remembers it for something else. It featured the first interracial love scene in a major Hollywood film. At the time, it was explosive. Theater owners in the South refused to screen the film. Some critics called it inappropriate. Others accused Raquel of using shock to stay relevant. But she didn't flinch. "I knew it would make waves," she said. "But I believed in the role, and I believed in the story." Raquel had always taken chances, but this one hit a nerve. And she knew it. She didn't care. Over the years, she continued to court controversy. From Myra Breckenridge to her high-glam public image, everything she did stirred conversation. But that wasn't an accident. Raquel thrived on tension. She used it as fuel. "People talked because they couldn't ignore me," she once said with a sly smile. That defiance, that fire, it often put her at odds with feminists too, which led to one of the more complicated chapters in her public story: the feminist firestorm. Despite being a woman who fought for control over her image, Raquel Welch wasn't always embraced by the feminist movement. To some, she was a symbol of male fantasy. Her glamorous image, tight clothes, and sex appeal seemed to reinforce the very ideas feminism sought to dismantle. But Raquel had her own view. "I never did anything I didn't agree with," she said in a later interview. "I was never exploited. I made my choices." She saw herself as empowered. She used her beauty, yes, but on her terms. She rejected the idea that femininity and feminism had to be at odds. In fact, she saw her independence, her boldness, and her success as proof of feminism in action. She may not have marched or burned bras, but she fought battles every day in dressing rooms, on sound stages, and in contract negotiations. And she won. The world had a hard time placing her. Was she liberated or complicit? Bold or vain? Powerful or problematic? But Raquel didn't care what category she fit into. She didn't need anyone's permission to be herself. And when the end finally came, she left behind more than a career. She left behind a legend. The final word on the bad girl of Hollywood. Raquel Welch passed away in 2023 at age 82. And when the news broke, it wasn't just Hollywood that mourned. It was fans, fashion icons, fellow actresses, journalists, generations of people who had grown up seeing her as the definition of beauty, confidence, and fire. She left behind more than 50 films, a Golden Globe, and one of the most recognizable faces of the 20th century. But perhaps her real legacy was her refusal to play nice with a system that wanted to control her. What some called bad behavior was just Raquel saying no. No to roles that insulted her. No to people who underestimated her. No to being a good girl when the world only respected rebels. She changed how women in Hollywood moved. She made it okay to be sexy and smart, to be glamorous and in charge, to speak up, push back, and walk away. In the end, Raquel Welch didn't just survive Hollywood, she bent it to her will. And that's not bad behavior. That's power. Raquel Welch was called bad because she refused to be controlled. In truth, she was bold, brilliant, and way ahead of her time. If her story inspired or surprised you, hit that like button, subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching.